In this video, I'm building a clean, timeless design TV console for my in-laws, and I do have full build plans available for this, linked down below in the video description if you'd like to build it yourself. I gave them a bunch of wood species and stain samples, and hard maple with a provincial stain is what they chose to match their existing fireplace mantel. The first day I started working on this, I didn't have much time, so one thing I could do relatively quickly was get the solid maple top glued up. So I got my 3 pieces chopped down to rough length, then flattened and one edge squared up on the joiner. When it comes to top panels, since I'm starting with rough sawn material, I'll pretty much just try to keep the pieces as thick as possible, just running them through the planer until they're all the same and flat, instead of taking them down to a specific thickness like 3/4 of an inch like everything else. Then I can put the squared up edge along the table saw fence to clean that other edge up and then get the pieces glued together. Now to when I really started working on this thing, starting with breaking down all the 3/4 inch maple plywood to size, bouncing between the table saw and track saw. While I'm just cutting some plywood, how about a little rant or maybe a warning for you guys? Nowadays, if you get on TikTok, it seems like 75% of the videos are just people peddling cheap products and making money with the TikTok shop. And they got me. They stinking got me. You might be thinking, man, that's a nice green hoodie you're wearing, John. How much was that? $20 total for 3 of them, all different colors. I put it on, it's nice and cozy, and I'm thinking, wow, that's a heck of a deal for just some work clothes I don't really care about. But after one day, this thing looked like it was 5 years old. I might be able to work in this 3 times before I wear a hole through and you guys can see my belly button. I know, you definitely get what you pay for. Just a little warning, don't get suckered into that cheap stuff on there like I did. Anyways, with all the parts cut to size, I could then swap over to a dado stack in the table saw to cut all the joinery. With this being a TV console with open shelving, we need it to be clean on both the inside and outside, with no screw holes or anything like that anywhere. Could do some sort of loose tenon joinery as well, but on something like this with all the interior dividers, dados just really shine, making assembly so much easier. On these wider pieces, it really helps having those Jessom stock guides on my fence that keeps the piece held down and pulled tight to the fence. If you aren't comfortable using a dado stack, just using a router and straight edge is another great option here to cut the grooves. Doing a little test fit and you can see just how easy it is with everything automatically lining up right where it's supposed to. The 3 interior pieces are already cut a 1/4 inch shallower, so the next thing I need to do is create a 1/4 inch rabbet on the inside of the 2 sides and bottom piece. This will be to recess the 1/4 inch plywood back panel. With the back rabbet cut, I completely sanded all the inside panels off camera and then I could go ahead and get this assembled. Simply adding glue to the dados and clamping it together to dry. I only have a couple of these long bar clamps, so one area I was able to just use pocket hole screws was on the bottom of the bottom panel, which of course will never be seen. Had to stand it upside down to be able to add all the clamps where I did, but just like that, it's assembled. With that drying, I could move on to milling the rest of the hard maple for the face frame and doors. I'm just taking this down to standard 3/4 of an inch material that you can buy off the shelf. Milling is a lot of work, trimmed down to just a few seconds in a video, but I do always prefer working with rough sawn material and being able to make sure everything's flat and square myself. Working on the face frame first, to get that assembled I'm drilling pocket holes on the back. I'm hoping some of you will get the plans and send me pictures of this you built with some white oak or maybe some fancy walnut or something, because just a warning if you've never worked with hard maple, it can be a pain. It's hard on your blades and bits and burns pretty easy, and like right here, it's hard on screws. For this first screw, I was a dummy and just used an impact driver like I normally do for driving screws. But with this hard maple, the first screw just snapped. So after I got the screw pried out, I switched over to using a regular drill to drive the screws in. Much smoother without the impact. And another thing I did to help was go ahead and dip the screws in some paste wax first. This really helps reduce friction and keeps the screws from getting too hot and breaking. But other than that, it's just working in an order to where I'm never trying to squeeze one piece in between two others, and using some scrap spacer blocks to make sure the openings are even and square. With that set aside, next I moved on to the base, starting with this simple rectangle frame just glued and screwed together, since I'll be covering those butt joints and screws in the next step. From there I'm adding these additional corner pieces that are mitered together and have another angled detail cut on the bottom inside edge. Pretty simple and clean design. I could go ahead and get these glued right to the frame, but we all can agree there's nothing more important than making sure miters are nice and crisp and as perfect as possible, right? So just using tape, I got those corners glued up and kept moving on to something else while they dried. Back on the main cabinet, one last thing I needed to add was these two stretchers on top. This gives me something to glue the face frame to along the front, nail the back panel to, and also where I'll be screwing through to attach the wood top. Up next, I could get the face frame glued and clamped on. Notice I haven't installed the back panel yet, and that's for a couple reasons. For one, it allows me access here to be able to add clamps on the middle dividers, and also it's just a real pain to spray finish inside closed boxes, so by leaving the back panel off and finishing them separately, it'll be so much easier and result in a better finish. Moving right along, up next is the two doors. For these I'm using this glass panel cabinet door bit set from Freud, and right before this video I just posted one where I go in depth on making glass cabinet doors several different ways, so be sure to check that video out for some more options. But this bit set works just like typical cabinet door bits in the router table. Run all four pieces through to make the grooves on the inside edge, and then switch bits to cut the tongues on the two rail pieces. At this point, the base corner pieces were set enough so those corners would stay crisp and tight, and I could just spread glue on the inside face and get them clamped to the frame. Now everything that has to be glued and clamped can officially be left to dry. At this stage, it's like, wow, I'm almost done. But then all the small stuff keeps coming to mind and adding up. I was excited to get the base attached to see what this would actually end up looking like, but before completely flipping it back over, I got all the edges rounded over and final sanded everything that wasn't already. Next, I got the back panel cut to size and drilled holes in each opening for power cords to pass through. These hole saws are pretty aggressive, so I'm doing a combination of running the drill in reverse to start to score the outer plywood layer, and then drilling partially through from each side to avoid just completely tearing up this 1/4 inch plywood. Just a little test fit, but again, I'll be finishing this separately. Of course, you always want some versatility when it comes to shelves, so here I'm using this Craig jig to get the shelf pin holes drilled in all 3 openings, and then getting the maple iron-on edge banding applied to the front of the shelves. To finish up the doors, I just needed to get the hinge cup and door pull holes drilled. Say that 3 times fast. I'm using these Blum inset face frame hinges, and it was impossible for me to film this, but again, another benefit of not putting the back panel on yet, I just set the door in place on some 1/8 inch spacers, and then the hinge plate gets screwed to the back of the face frame. Super easy and no math at all in this case. With these being inset doors, I just needed to glue a small block to the back of the face frame so the door would stop flush. Now to finish up the solid wood top. To attach the top to the cabinet, I'm drilling these elongated holes through those stretchers. The top panel will expand and contract seasonally across the width of the panel, so these slotted holes will give it plenty of room to do so. After cutting the top to final size, I added a chamfer to the bottom edge to tie into the angles from the base, and then of course lots of sanding to get it ready for finish. Before staining, I applied a pre-stain conditioner to everything. Maple is one of those wood species that can be super blotchy with stain, so the pre-stain conditioner really helps minimize that. And like I mentioned, I did a ton of samples for them, and good old Minwax Provincial Stain is what looked the best. For the top coat, I'm using General Finishes Clear Poly, which is a water-based product. When going over an oil stain with water-based clear, you just want to make sure that the stain is completely dry. Like I let the stain dry over the weekend, so it was 2.5, 3 days. I simply just prefer to work with water-based products if I can. You just got to make sure that oil-based stain is completely dry. Now to get this thing buttoned up. To attach the top, I actually just put a square drive bit on a ratchet to drive the screws in, and then got the back panel set inside those rabbets and nailed on. For the glass, I ordered two different options, so I'm not going to completely install them here quite yet until they choose, but as you can see, the glass just sits right in there inside the frame. And then what's great about those router bits that I used is it makes an additional groove to use this glass retainer molding. It presses snug right in that groove and holds the glass secure. Clean look that was easy and no additional work. So let me know down in the comments, which glass are you choosing if it was yours? The clear glass or the textured obscure glass? Honestly, I like both and each have their pros and cons. Full build plans along with all the tools and supplies I showed throughout the video are linked down below in the description. You know the spiel, every like and subscribe really does help and I appreciate it all. Thanks for watching.